Welcome friends to Literature Mantra. I'm Harsh Singh, and in this video we will discuss how to approach the UPSC CSE essay paper. Now, this is a YouTube channel for English literature. So why am I discussing the essay paper? Well, that's because this time in UPSC direct question आया था P.B.Shelley से. Poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world, and of course there are some other options to choose from, and many of them are quotations. Many of them can be answered very well by a student of literature. And I'm not talking about English literature optional. मैं GS की बात कर रहा हूँ. The essay component which everybody has to attempt, no matter what your optional subject is. Now, if we recall, P.B.Shelley's quotation is, "Poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world." Now, before discussing this in little bit more detail, let's take a broad view of the essay paper. What should be the approach towards the essay paper? In particular, this particular question. Should you write a literary essay? मतलब ये कि something where you give examples from the field of literature, or should you give non-literary examples? First, you should not write a literary essay. मतलब the way we write, in literature paper, for example, in English literature optional, that is not the correct approach, because here the question paper is going to be checked by a generalist, not necessarily a specialist of English literature, not necessarily by the professors of English literature. Whereas in the English literature optional, क्या होता है उसमें? College professors or retired university professors generally check the question paper. But यहाँ पे वैसा नहीं है. Question of course literature के field से ही आया है. P.B.Shelley's quotation, very famous quotation. But you should not limit yourself to the field of literature. You should give examples from other areas as well. Now, पहले तो ये बात करते हैं, who is a poet? Poet कहते किसे हैं? See, poet is basically anybody who writes literary pieces. Now, what does literary piece mean? Literary piece का मतलब ये नहीं होता that the poems that we have read, or let's say rhyming words or rhyming sentences, that is not the only thing which can be called poetry. Even examples from the Bible, they can also be called poetry. Then if we take the example of from India, Upanishads of India, then the Bhagavad Gita of India, even the things that are mentioned there, of course, let's say they are theological texts, or let's say texts dealing with religion. But there is also a lot of poetry in that. A lot of insights are also there. So poet is anybody who can write in that way. And see, poets are not oblivious to the realities of the world, but are highly learned people. Just because we read about poets in English literature, it doesn't mean that मतलब poetry का मतलब है कि हाँ, Nightingale is singing and and poets only write about things that are divorced from realities. It's not that, and Shelley's personal life indicates, and also his quotation, that poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. This is an assertion, and that shows that the imaginative practice and political activism are not divorced. If you know about P.B.Shelley, you would agree that he was also very much politically engaged. He was also a well-informed person, and not just he, but all the major writers. If we see, whether it be T.S. Eliot, whether it be Virginia Woolf, all the major writers, they are very well-informed people. Even take the example of Raja Rao. All these people, writers generally, whether poets or novelists, generally they are very educated and well-informed people. And when they write something, it is not just to do with imagination or from the world of fantasy. बस उसके बारे में नहीं लिखते वो लोग. Mostly what they want to say is something about the real world, but of course in a imaginative way. Rather than giving concrete examples or referring to concrete situations, what they do is they generalize. That is what the work of an author is, or a poet is. So, what can be classified as poetry? As I said, religious texts can be classified as poetry, and of course, the works of poets, that is of course called poetry. No, and as I said that poets give us insights. And why are they called unacknowledged legislators? Because see, पहली बात तो ये कि legislator किसको बोलते हैं? Parliamentarian. Those people who make laws in parliament are called legislators. Okay. So why are poets being referred to as unacknowledged legislators? See, legislation क्या होता है? Law होता है, right? But what do poets give us? They give us moral laws or moral codes of conduct, ethical codes of conduct. That is also a kind of law. Of course, it can't be enforced in a court of law. Matlab, it does not have the force of legality. But can we say that, we do not, or we are not influenced by moral laws? No, of course we are influenced by moral codes of conduct. Of course we are influenced by ethical codes of conduct. And ultimately, when something becomes very important, we give it the shape of a law by, passing it in parliament and saying that now it is legally binding. But ultimately, everything starts from here. Morality, ethics, and the insights that we have about life, about the world. So in that sense, they are unacknowledged legislators. They are not called legislators, but they give us many laws or principles which actually make our life better. And not just the individual's life, but also the world in general. The world can be a better place if we follow some words of wisdom. So that is why they are called unacknowledged legislators. And see, जब आप example देना है इसमें, then what you should do is, since this essay or the essay paper in UPSC CSE, means UPSC Civil Services exam, is checked by a journalist, यहाँ पे आप example देना from current affairs or things which everybody knows. मतलब कहने का ये मतलब है. So for example, you can quote PM Modi, because once he also, I think it was 2 or 3 years back in his Independence Day speech, when he quoted the Tamil poet Saint Tiruvalluvar. And this was in the context of a water crisis. He said that, बहुत पहले the great Saint Tiruvalluvar mentioned about water scarcity and how water scarcity can lead to water crisis and ultimately total destruction. So you can quote his words, because everybody has read that, everybody has listened to the speech of Prime Minister. So that can be a good example. And of course, with respect to other examples, you can quote many things, which are there in the Bhagavad Gita. Because see, if you have read the Bhagavad Gita, of course, it is a theological text. But इसमें अगर आप पढ़ोगे तो it's nothing related to, let's say, कोई पूजा पाठ के बारे में नहीं दिया हुआ इसमें all it mentions is how to make your personal life good. And there are many words of wisdom that are there. So ultimately this is also a kind of poetry, na? Also a form of poetry. अब जिन्होंने भी लिखा है, of course we say that there was one person who wrote it, and we believe that these are the words of God, right? But अगर आप realistically सोचो तो probably जिन्होंने भी लिखा है, or let's say maybe an entire team of people would have written this, or whoever has written this, इतना तो तय है that he or she was a person of great wisdom and knowledge. That is why that person or those people passed on that wisdom in the form of a theological text. So this can also be considered a work of poetry. So you can quote some verses, from the Bhagavad Gita. And of course, the Bible is very famous. There are many things which you can quote from the Bible. And one more thing which you perhaps already know, जो government of India हमेशा कहती रहती है, Vasudev Kutumbakam. You can always quote this. And this is from Upanishad, one of the Upanishads. So this is also a form of poetry, na? So just see that, poetry is not limited to rhyming words or rhyming sentences or the world of imagination. Poetry also deals with realities of life, realities of the world. So in that sense, poets can be called the unacknowledged legislators of the world. So with respect to this particular topic, or let's say this particular option of the essay paper, these were my thoughts. If you have some other thoughts or other ideas, write it down in the comments section below. And in case you want guidance for the essay paper, and especially if you are a student of literature, then just WhatsApp us on this number given below, 7678160296. And to all the students who are preparing for civil services exam for next year, means 2023, I wish you all the best. And in case you need guidance for UPSC English Literature optional or the essay paper, just WhatsApp us on this number. We will reply as soon as possible. So to all UPSC aspirants, I wish you all the best.